So our emotional state is fed much more by what we tell ourselves about something than oftentimes than what actually happened. We can't turn our stories off. We are meaning creating machines. As I said before, it's the way we're designed, but the lens through which our stories are told is always our choice.
I'm super excited to start, the session for today. So hello and good evening all, and it's great to see you all joining the session today and really investing the next hour and connecting with us, the Professional Development Forum. So my name is Tal and I will be the moderator for today's session. For those that are unfamiliar with PDF and what we do, we are a group of volunteers that was established to help diverse young professionals find fulfillment in the modern workplace. And so what we do is we do a number of webinars and we do a number of introductions to thought leaders to give young professionals a network and access to knowledge, mindset and network to become really the best version of themselves. So a bit of housekeeping before we start. Please note that this is a recorded session, so it will be distributed by social media. So please turn on your camera if you can, even if it's for a minute, and you'll be able to have that available on our social media. I would also ask that if you have any questions, please feel free to put in the chat room, or at any time put up your hand. So we welcome all the questions and all the feedback, and obviously the session is all about you learning and you asking the questions. What we will be covering in today's session is really around three key areas. So really about understanding what is the difference between resilience and mental toughness and why they both matter, especially times where, we're in times of uncertainty, we're in times of change, we're in times of, adapting to those changes. The second key is really about how do we have a mindset that's going to drive performance. What does that mindset look like and how do we continue to build on that mindset? And really the third is about self-leadership. You hear a lot about self-care, self-realization. So this is really about self-leadership. So really, what are the 5 key in building resilience and mental toughness so that you can bring the best version of yourself when you're under pressure? So before going into that, just a little bit about Toni. So Toni was born in New Zealand. She actually started her career in finance and held a number of very high-profile leadership role as head of marketing. So as she became more senior, she found herself becoming more stressed, trying to measure up and every day and in every aspect. And she felt at some point that she was a swan she felt she was a swan looking good on the surface, but really pedaling down hard underneath. So that was a point where she made a pivotal move to move out of the corporate and really look into what that she wants to make a change. And that was the point where she decided to dedicate her life in making a positive and fundamental difference in people and people's life. So that slide there is basically Toni in a nutshell, the books that she's actually created and designed and built and developed, and the number of companies that she worked at. And then so with that, I wanted to hand it over to Toni to really walk us through those 3 key takeaways or 3 key areas that we're going to be discussing today.
Thank you, Cal. Thank you for that lovely warm welcome. And thank you for having me at the Professional Development Forum. It's really great to be here, and I've been looking forward to this chat that we're going to have tonight. So let's get into it, because time's of the essence. Feel free, as Tal mentioned, to put your comments, your questions, your insights, share those as we go through. Let's make this as interactive as possible. Boy, last year, COVID showed us what was possible to achieve when there was a crisis. So McKinsey research revealed that on average, we responded 20 to 25% faster in terms of making investments into technology development and like digitization, for example. So if you think back into your organisation, the amount of change that happened last year, I bet it was massive. So people rallied around and we all dug deep. But our resilience reserves are finite. And, for lots of us, we're still feeling depleted from last year. Last week, I was chatting to a chief of people and she said, Toni, this year I wanted thematically across our organisation to really anchor simplicity and to anchor joy across our organisation. But she said, Toni, we're now in April, I'm not feeling any joy. And if I'm not feeling the joy, then I imagine that people around me are still feeling stressed and depleted from last year as well. She said, how do we address this? And she admitted that her CEO isn't even acknowledging that that's how people are feeling. So I think the reality is we're still all in transition. We're still trying to figure out how to make hybrid working work. And according to the experts, the amount of change that we can absorb this year without becoming fatigued is about half of what it was last year. So we still, though, need to lean in, and we've got targets and we've got goals and we've got things that we need to achieve. So I'm really curious to know, on an average day for you, what are you thinking and feeling at the moment around coming into work and giving it your best? So if we can turn our first poll on, I'm just curious to get a sense of, how you're feeling at work right now.
I've just launched a poll.
So be honest, this is all anonymous. We've got 73% of people feeling, nearly 80% people feeling up and down. We've got some people feeling pumped and ready, fantastic, and people feeling pretty good. But the overwhelming majority of us are feeling up and down, and that certainly is aligned to what I'm hearing out there. I'm not seeing any surprises there, and great if you're feeling pumped and ready to go. Regardless of how we're feeling, though, there's one thing that's true. There is never a straight line to success, is there? No one's got that. No one has a perfect life. No one's holding it together all of the time. And we're always becoming new versions of ourselves. I mean, think of the version of you 5, 10, or even 15 years ago compared to the version of you that's sitting here tonight. So we're always developing in some way, shape, or form as we move through life. So I want to ask you a couple of questions, and feel free to write these questions down. The first one is this: who are you being when you're being your best? Who are you being when you're being your best? And what's the next best version of you that you really want to become? Interesting questions, aren't they? Sometimes things don't go our way. Sometimes we feel stuck with how things are. And sometimes, especially when it comes to change, we feel like we're losing rather than winning. We've all got our own set of circumstances that we're navigating through. It might surprise you to know that 30% of the world's billionaires never went to university. 30% of the billionaires on the planet never went to university. So people that achieve and succeed, it's not that they're smarter and it's not that they have more potential. There's been a lot of research over time that's been done to figure out what separates, what differentiates between people who achieve and succeed versus the people that don't. And the number one indicator of your success and potential comes down to your pattern of internal versus external control. And what I mean by that is this. So, for example, if you have a problem, do you think about the problem in terms of the responsibility or the solution to the problem? Is there something that is going to come from within you? Or are you hoping and wishing for someone else or something within your environment to change? Anyone that externalizes their results gives themselves little power to change. And I appreciate that not everything is in our control, but the opportunity to empower yourself is. I remember this story, and it was a story based in the States. I think it was in California. It was an alcoholic father. So not a great father, not a good role model father at all, a big alcoholic. And he had 2 twin sons, 2 twin boys. One of the twin boys ended up becoming an alcoholic. And his worldview was, well, look at the example that I had, the role model that I had, how could my life have been any different? The other twin brother went on to get a scholarship and put himself through college, was happily married and had a really good job. And his view was, well, look where I came from. I had to create something that was different to that. So I'm sure you've heard the saying before, we don't, our circumstances don't control us. You know, our mindset and our attitude do. So people that do succeed take responsibility for themselves, and it's black and white, black and white. Luck actually has very little luck to do with it. And I know that some of us get lucky once in a while, and I'd love to win lotto too. So challenge, uncertainty and risk are built into success, however you define success for yourself. But meeting your obstacles and challenges, you know, this takes energy and focus and drive and commitment. But what enables all of that? It's resilience and mental toughness. So how do we ensure that we've got the mental skills and the mindset so that we can bring our best even when things are tough and when things are uncertain? And so this is the key question that we're going to focus on tonight. And I'm grateful that you're here, and I would love to send you after this presentation some resources. I'd love to send these resources to you on a complimentary basis. So just email me at toni@tonicourtney.com. There's a resource on building influence. There's another resource on 7 keys to handling stress and setback. And I'd also love to send you a white paper of mine called Confidence Decoded. And in that white paper are some really great strategies for building confidence and for learning to be able to back yourself, trust yourself, and be able to build your self-esteem. So if you do suffer from imposter syndrome, quite often it's called that, then I'd love to be able to send that through to you. So as I said, just email me and I would love to get those resources through to you. So let's get underway, shall we? So the difference between resilience and mental toughness. So let's talk about resilience first. So resilience is about pushing through. It's about getting through a tough situation and keeping on going. It's a little bit like staying in, let's call it, say, staying in an unhappy marriage for like 30 years, where you do the best that you can, you try and get by, but you feel like you're in survival mode. And I think being in a situation like that takes a massive amount of resilience. So resilience helps you cope and soldier on when you're in survival mode. Mental toughness, though, that helps you lean in and step up and to feel the pressure, but to bring your best. So in that marriage example, it might be about initiating some really tricky conversations, and it might even be about leaving the marriage. And perhaps a marriage example is not the best example, but you know what I mean. We all need resilience and mental toughness. There are times when we've just got to push through. And then there are times where we've got to lean into the pressure and perform. They say that tennis is a mental game. I don't know if we've got any tennis fans in the room, but I've always had a bit of a secret crush on Rafael Nadal. I know that I'm not the only one that's got a crush on Rafa. And I remember watching an interview. He'd just won a Grand Slam. And I remember watching this interview, and the interviewer said to him, you know, Rafa, right at the start of the game, everything was going wrong for you. When everything was going wrong, how did you stay so calm? And he said, I wasn't calm. He said, I was really nervous. But those moments are built into the game. And how I show up in those moments doesn't depend on anything else or anyone around me. I'm in that moment, and they're part of the game. And I thought that that was a really nice summary of what mental toughness is all about. You know, it's easy to stay in our comfort zone and to soldier on and to cope and to be really resilient. And sometimes we just need to be in that spot. But there are times, though, that we need to step up. And this is when our mental toughness really, really shines. So our capacity for resilience and mental toughness comes through our mindset. Our mindset is driving how we think. So how we think drives our behaviour, and how we react and respond drives how we experience anything. And how we experience anything is actually driving the quality of our life. So in short, our mindset is really driving the quality of life. How we react and how we respond in any situation will make or break what you'll achieve. Research tells us that mindset contributes twice as much to our performance compared with technical skills or educational background. So again, it's that attitude, mind over matter. And remember the example that I gave before in terms of people that have succeeded and made a lot of money. And I'm not suggesting for a second that everyone would aspire to being a billionaire. I don't. And everyone has their own measures for success. If you think about your mindset, though, over the last, say, few months or 6 months or even 12 months, where's your mindset been on that scale of suffering, surviving, thriving? Feel free just to comment in the Q&A box where you think you've been. For me, I think I've been all over the place, particularly last year when I was homeschooling 2 primary school children. One of my kids did not want to do any schoolwork on any day of the week, and it was really frustrating. I was running my business, and it all felt like it was too much. So I definitely felt like I was in survival mode for a good portion of last year. And I'm just curious, is there anything that's come in the Q&A box, Tal? Let us know where you think you've been sitting in the last couple of months. So oftentimes people say to me, Toni, I'm leading people. And I've got people in my team, and some of them have a great mindset and some of them have a really fixed mindset. So how do we move people from a fixed mindset or a negative mindset to a positive mindset? So I'm trusting that might align to the question that was asked. How do we move people? And I want to point out that no one has a perfect mindset all of the time. Our real thoughts and feelings are messy. They are far more messy than what we would want other people to know. We've all got patterns and habits that are driving our internal dialogue that creates our mindset. And I think that this idea that we've got to be positive all of the time is just crazy. I think to be human is to be able to experience the whole realm of human emotions that are available to us. That said, our mindset is a daily choice. Our mindsets aren't fixed. And when we work with a positive mindset, our performance metrics, whether it's engagement, our creativity, our performance can increases, and there's plenty of research that backs that up. So I want to reference this with 2 very different ends of the mindset spectrum. And I'm going to reference the work here by Carol Dweck. She's written a book called Mindset. She's an American social anthropologist, and she's in a leading leadership guru globally around what we know and understand about mindset. So this disempowered mindset, obstacles are big, things are too hard. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I focus what's on wrong. And people, when they're in this mode of thinking, tend to focus on themselves and want to protect themselves. They want to stay in their comfort zone with what they know and with what they believe and perceive about themselves. On the other end of the spectrum is this growth mindset, where people feel the fair do it anyway because they appreciate that regardless of the result, there's going to be something there to learn, and there's going to be progress that's going to be made. And people believe that persistence and effort will pay off. In terms of moving from fixed to growth, and these are Carol's terms, I want to, for other people, we can't change their mind, we can only influence their thinking. Whether we're trying to move ourselves or others, it involves, as a starting point, creating a safe space for existing status quo thinking to be challenged. So if I'm a leader and I'm managing somebody else who's very, very fixed, I need to remember that I cannot change their mind. I can only influence their thinking. And what space can I create around them that gives them the time and the space for them to challenge their own thinking? And within the opportunity of challenging their own thinking, they're safe enough to invite new perspectives. And within new perspectives, there's more choice. And within more choice, there's freedom to make a different decision. But safety is the most important critical factor in being able to challenge someone else's thinking, and for ourselves to be able to challenge our own thinking. You know, it's okay to go, well, I just don't agree, but I've got to be able to be prepared to challenge why I don't agree for me to actually change my mind. I'm trusting that that makes sense. And there's a lot more that I could go into there, but I need to keep us moving on because time is marching on. And Tal, just let me know if there are any other comments that show up in the Q&A box too. But feel free to write your comments and your insights down. Was the question before written down? Can I come back to that now or at the end?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So he was asking, how can we change our mindset from suffering to thriving mindset? So some people always fear that when they're exposed to new situations, but some people don't care. They find new ways in that situation.
Yes, that's a great question. Let me go through the 5 keys, and can we come back to this question at the end and say if there's anything else that we didn't cover that you think might be useful. So let's make sure we've got a couple of minutes at the end, because I'd rather go through this content and come back and fill the gaps.
Yep, that's fine. I'll make sure we ask it again.
Yeah, so what I want to do now is that I want to cover these 5 keys with you. So these keys will help, and most of them focus on how we think. So they're mindset related, about building resilience and mental toughness so that in times of stress or pressure, we can show up as our best selves. I want to point out that these keys are not rocket science. There's no magic formula. There is no silver bullet. And oftentimes it's doing the simple or the basic things consistently. And sometimes doing the basic things consistently can seem sometimes like they're the hardest things to do. From these 5 keys, I'm going to challenge you to take away 1 or 2 things from this that you're going to put into action. Don't let this be just a nice conversation that sort of was food for thought. Don't let it be that, because the value you can get from being here is what you're prepared to put in action after this conversation. And I'd love for you to round back and let me know what you've done and how you've got on. So I'm in your corner. I'd love to champion you. So again, email me and let me know what you've decided. So the first key is to look after yourself. So I don't know about you, but last week I was juggling school holidays. I had kids at home and it was about lunchtime. And my children said, you know, I want this for lunch, I want that for lunch. And I was like, you know, this is not a restaurant. You know, there's no menu. But by the time I got both of them sorted with what they wanted for lunch, it was like 3 o'clock and I hadn't even had lunch. So there's 2 parts to building resilience. We need to be able to tap into the resilience reserves we've got, but we also need to build it. And I think this is the second sphere of resilience that we sometimes forget. It's great having a support network around you, it's critical, but your self-care as a starting point, it must come from you. So caring for yourself builds resilience. So rather than coming last, which I'm very good at doing, especially when it comes to my children, and I need to remember this too. So rather than coming last, we need to tell ourselves this: I'm so busy at work, I can't afford not to take care of myself. So I'm wondering if there was a scale of 1 to 10 where you would put yourself, you know, on your scale. The importance of well-being is now really acknowledged. It's well known, and it's been researched and researched and researched. Research from Deloitte tells us that on average, about 40% of Australians aren't getting enough sleep. So, you know, it's getting enough sleep, taking care of ourselves, exercise, diet, all the things that you've been hearing about, particularly since COVID started. And I think it's easy to not have time for yourself, and we've got to create it. So this is around having healthy boundaries for ourselves. Self-care isn't a one-off. It's something, it's a habit, and it's a habit that we need to do consistently, acknowledging that on some days, life and other things, demands from others, whatever it is, will always get in the way. So your self-care really is about the habits that you have in place to look after you. So I'm wondering if there was one thing that you could do in the next week. It might be a habit that's new. It might be changing something up for how you'd normally do it, or starting something new. What's one thing that you could do that would put yourself first and create a boundary around it so it becomes as best as you can, non-negotiable? I'm wondering what that might be. So feel free to just jot your idea or your habit that you're going to hold yourself to in the next week. Feel free to write it down and let us know what it is in the Q&A box. I'll be curious to know. So caring for yourself is about all of those things, but it's not only that. Caring for yourself also is about how you treat yourself, and how you treat yourself is a function of how you talk to yourself. How you talk to yourself is a function of the quality of relationship that you have with you. So that brings me to our second key. But before I cover this one, was there any habits that people put down?
Yes, so respecting a consistent sleeping time.
Yeah. Yep, sleep's really important, especially if you're someone who it's really late and you know you should be in bed, but there's this next thing you want to watch and the thing on Netflix hasn't finished and you think you deserve the time. I've got going for myself at the moment, because I fell prey to that too, is to be able to say, no, the time that I'm going to choose to have is the time asleep rather than the time watching TV or doing something else at the end of the night. So sleep is really important. Anything else, Tap?
So there's nothing, but I think even like having the space for me time, right? Whether that's just sitting down, you know, reading a book, listening to music, cooking. I think just having that space for yourself is a good start.
Yes, and you've got to create it as if it's as important or equally as important as other things that you hold to be important. Because if you don't value the time as being important, and it might only be 5 minutes or 2 minutes, or for whatever it is, the amount of time doesn't matter. But when you create the time and make sure that you give yourself that time, you know, that's you giving to you and you keeping the promise that you've made to yourself. When you don't keep the promises that you've made to yourself, each time you don't, there's just a little bit of your self-esteem that gets stripped and stripped and stripped away. And the person that you've got to be there for, you know, be your word to yourself first. So this is about learning to trust you. So again, the quantity of time doesn't matter, but it's this consistency of you giving time for you, for the things that you enjoy, and for the things that really inspire your passion projects, whatever they are. Give yourself time for things that you enjoy. So our second key, this is retraining your inner critic. So I want to ask you, what's your self-talk like? Because this is a segue from the conversation we've just had. So what I'm talking about is the little voice, the voice that you've been listening to as you've been listening to me. That voice, that's the little voice I'm talking about. How often do you put yourself down, or how often do you judge yourself critically? You know, for example, if someone says to you, yeah, you did a great job, and you go, yeah, nah, it was okay. And then you think to yourself, oh, I could have, I should have, why didn't I? And you always create the gap between what the validation was that was given to you and how it could have been better. There's this quote that I love from Lisa Hayes, and it's this: be careful what you say to yourself, because you are always listening. And I think that that's a really important thing to remember. So your inner voice reflects the quality of relationship that you have with yourself. And for most people, their self-talk is a lot more negative than positive. And this is a habit. And for most people, I find that that's so habitual that they don't even notice how negative their self-talk is because they are so used to it. The truth is that we all fear not being good enough. This I'm not good enough fear is universal. We're all worried about whether we're good enough. I've never met anyone who at some point doubts themselves. Self-doubt is normal. And at the end of the day, we all have, to some extent, a fear of not being good enough. So we need to remember that we are good enough. We were born good enough. We're always going to be good enough. And we've all got progress to make. No one's perfect, neither are you. And we're all going to make mistakes. But more and more, when we get so concerned over the fear of being judged, what underpins that is this deep-seated, deep-rooted fear that I'm not good enough. And the last thing I want to do is someone to find out. And so it's this ongoing internal dialogue that we have that we wouldn't want anyone else to know, that drives this critique that's going on for us all of the time. So we need to learn to retrain it. It's like going to the gym for 30 years and our muscles are so big and strong. It's like we need to just stop going to the gym. We're not renewing that membership. We need to take out a membership at a different gym, the gym where we start to build this different muscles around acknowledging and knowing that we are good enough and that we've got progress to make. So when you catch yourself with that self-critique, self-talk, the first thing is to be aware of it and to notice it, not to again fuel the critical conversation by being critical about the critical conversation you're having. Just notice it, accept it, and then say, look, is this the conversation I want to have? Is that comment, that thought that I just had, I've just had it, accept that you've just had it, but is it helping? Is it helping and serving me? And if it's not, then let it go. What else can I choose to focus on instead? And the second thing is to find at the end of your day, when you're thinking back about the day that you've had, find something in your day to acknowledge yourself for. Whether it's small or big, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be, you've finished War and Peace, or you've just got the best result ever for something that you've done. It could be as simple as smiling at people that as you've met during the day and acknowledging people and saying hello. So acknowledging effort, acknowledging who you're being for others, acknowledging whatever it is that you've given and contributed to your day. I know that you don't wake up and go, I'm going to stuff it all up today. I know that when you get up and as you're starting your day, you're going to give it your best. You always do. So retraining that inner critic involves changing the focus that you have that has you re-look at and revalue the contribution that you've made and that you're making in a way where you begin to acknowledge you. And so this is the conversation at the new gym. And it's not about being arrogant. It's not about that at all. But it is about learning to self-reflect and even self-critique in a way that can look at what I've learned. What could I do differently next time? But it's in a way that helps build you up and acknowledges what you've done as your best, rather than always identifying the gap between what wasn't right, what should have been different, what I didn't do, and that fear that you're being judged in the process. So until we decide that we're good enough, we fear being judged by others. And to avoid this, we have self-limits in place. So I don't know if there's any self-limits up there on the slide that you recognise. I'm too busy, I'm going to wait, I don't know enough yet, I just need a bit more confidence, now's not the right time. It is the way it is. I'm sure that some of those are familiar. So the limits that we put on ourselves, they can show up as excuses, they can show up as apathy. So, and apathy is, for example, it is the way that it is. It could be worse, but it's okay. It's going to get better. And these excuses and self-limits, they keep us in our comfort zone. So we are wired to keep ourselves safe. We all have varying self-protection mechanisms at play, and building self-awareness is all about being able to identify them and to be able to ask ourselves, is this really an excuse, or is this something that's actually worth paying attention to? And is it actually something that I'm going to decide is, I'm going to wait until, and I'm going to wait may be the best decision, but differentiate between, is it really an excuse that you don't really need to wait? If you wait for all of your ducks to line up, they're never going to line up exactly the way you want. So you're going to be hoping and wishing and waiting for a long time. So remember that fear isn't going away. Fear's always going to be there when we step outside of our comfort zone. Courage can only show up in the face of fear. Courage doesn't show up any other way. So if you're wishing and hoping that you'll get enough courage, you'll only feel that courage in the face of fear. So courage happens in action. Confidence happens in action. And using resilience happens in action as well. So my son's decided that he wants to start earning money. He's 10. This is Alex. And he decided that he wanted to start a dog walking business. And we live in Moonee Ponds in Melbourne. It's a really safe suburb. So that's a picture of him last weekend. He drew this poster, and I love it. He's got a little bit of information about the walker, and he puts very trusty. I thought that was very good of him as well. So, but he said to me, Mum, what if no one responds to the ad? And I said, you won't know until you try. And so I think children are actually doing a much better at feeling the fear and doing things anyway. Fear's learned. And there's fears that we have that hold us back, the self-limits that we have for ourselves, or oftentimes, the conversation, we've had it so many times, it's just so easy to have. And I think being able to challenge those limits and to be able to get into action is really important. So focus on what you can learn rather than focus on what could go wrong. Know that you're going to give it your best because you're always doing your best. So again, have a think about one self-limit, and we're just going to put those back there. There are only a taste. There's hundreds and hundreds of self-limits, but have a think about one self-limit that resonates with you up there, that you're going to decide, I've got enough resilience, I'm going to get out there and give something a go. And again, email me and let me know what you've done, because I'd love to know what self-limit you've addressed and what you've done.
You instilled a great mindset in him.
What's that?
You instilled a great mindset in him.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. It rained today, and I'm sure that, the posters are probably all fallen down. But that wasn't the point. The point was for him to be able to have a go. Yeah. So thank you, Tal. That's very kind feedback. So the fourth key is to be mindful of the stories that you tell ourselves. So our emotional state, let me have a sip of water. Our emotional state gets defined much more by the stories that we tell ourselves than pretty much anything else. So if you have a think about what triggers you, for example, someone doesn't do what you want them to do. So they might not show up in a meeting, for example, and they might not even let you know that they even can't make it. And you might think, I thought they were engaged in this. I thought that they were coming. And then you write an email to them and they don't respond. And you think, well, what, is it something that and then you think back, well, the last couple of weeks, yeah, they have been a little bit off. Yeah, and that one time when I walked past them, they didn't even say hello. And so easily we can create spin and drama, and it brings it back to a meaning that we create. And usually our meanings make it something about ourselves. We are all guilty of being meaning creating machines, because it's the way that we're designed. And our meanings then turn into spin and stories and drama that we often call the truth. And we love to be right about our sense of truth that we've defined for ourselves. So when something happens, we give it a meaning. And our meaning makes sense of something. So this is what we do. But there's a what's happened, and then there's, well, what have we made it mean? So our emotional state is fed much more by what we tell ourselves about something than oftentimes than what actually happened. We can't turn our stories off. We are meaning creating machines. As I said before, it's the way that we're designed. But the lens through which our stories are told is always our choice. So I'm wondering if there's been, I'm sure all of us get triggered from time to time, and have a think about when the last time was that you were really triggered. I remember a week or so ago, I was on LinkedIn, and someone that I worked with a long time ago posted something that made himself look great, but it was a blatant lie. And I remember going, whoa, I was really triggered. But what I remembered back to was a useful thinking model that I now want to share with you. So this useful thinking model, I'm hopeful that you will enjoy learning this, and it'll be something really practical for you to take away from today. So as I mentioned before, the thing to do is to be really cognizant of and to be able to separate out what happened versus what did I make it mean. So when we can do that, we can actually, because oftentimes, you know, the spin and the drama is the meaning that we've created around it. So when we can separate it out, it gives us the opportunity to take a step back and to consider, well, on the basis of this happened, I'm going to just let go of all the meaning that I created around it. If I focus on what happened, then what are some perspectives I can choose to think about based on this rather than this? And oftentimes then, well, what perspective am I going to choose? What am I going to decide? And then what am I going to do? Does this make sense, Tal? Do I need to give another example? Is there an example that someone can maybe share that we could cover off?
Yeah, I think what would be helpful is just understanding how you apply the thinking model. So, for example, if we look at a situation, and it could be outside, is professional or personal, right?
Yes, so let me give an example. So a couple of years ago, I worked with Maria, and we were in a coaching agreement, and she came to a coaching session one day, and she was not happy. She said, Toni, my boss, I was expecting to be able to have this great new project to work on, but my boss has given the project to somebody else. And the meaning that she created around was that her boss didn't value her as much anymore. So that was what the story that she made up. So what happened was that she wasn't given a project that she wanted. What she made it mean is that her boss didn't value her anymore. So when we focused on your boss didn't give you the project, we considered some perspectives that she hadn't considered before. So was there something that you needed to learn? Was there some sort of skills that you needed to equip yourself with so that you would have a similar project next time? So she went from thinking I'm not good enough to having a different kind of conversation with her boss. Did she let her boss know how much she wanted the project, or was she just expecting to get it? So when we were able to work through the scenario with her, she was so invested that she was undervalued, and she was not being able to get past being able to see that she should have been chosen, she wasn't. And the only choice she thought she had available was actually to leave her job. She was this upset. But when we looked at, well, kind of all that's happened is that there was a project that wasn't assigned to you. And then when we looked at a whole bunch of other different perspectives, what actually happened is that their boss had a completely different project in mind for her, but the boss was actually just pushing it through a couple of other key stakeholders before he wanted to brief Maria on it.
So in that situation, how do you then make yourself visible in terms of, being in forefront of
How do you mean in the forefront, Tal?
in front of your boss's mind to be the person that is going to be the right for the role?
So it may be a conversation to say, look, I appreciate that you have assigned, have someone else is being able to do this brand new great project. I'd love to be able, the next time that project like that comes on, I'd really love to be able to have the chance to project lead that. And what I'd love to know and get some feedback from you on is how I could best equip myself to make sure I'm really ready to be able to step into that opportunity and to be able to do really well leading that particular opportunity. So instead of thinking I'm not valued anymore, it's what do I need to learn? What do I need to equip myself with? And how can you help me during the process? Does that make sense? It's a really different way to think. But oftentimes we get so caught up in the meaning that we created that we don't realize that there's always lots more perspective to consider. And in the different perspective, oftentimes is bringing the growth mindset, or it's bringing an attitude where we bring our best rather than think of and rather than be the victim, which was certainly the case for Maria. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what happened when we can separate out what happened versus what we made it mean? Then on basis of what happened, what perspective am I going to choose here? What am I going to decide and what am I going to do? So another example, someone walks past me without saying hello. Instead of going, well, what have I done to them? I'm going to go, they've just walked past me and they haven't looked at me. That's all that happened. What perspective am I going to choose? They're really busy. They're obviously really focused. They're really intense. And there's something that they're thinking intensely about and they're looking down at the floor. What am I going to do? Next time I see them, or I might even give them a call. I noticed that you were looking down. I walked past you. You didn't see me. You're obviously really busy. Is there something I can do to help? So that's a more resourceful perspective than thinking, what did I do to this person? They didn't say hello. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's always many more perspectives available. And so it's about differentiating between what happened and the spin and the stories and the drama, so we can actually choose a perspective in line with how we actually want to show up, in line with the best version of ourselves.
Yeah, and Peter made a great comment just on the chat by saying, it's about taking responsibility, how you can impact the situation positively next time, rather than just getting bogged down into thinking the world is against you.
Yes, exactly. The world's not against us. And how we think is always our choice. We can't feel anything without the thinking that we have done that creates the feeling. So it is about taking responsibility. Thank you, Peter, for your comment. I absolutely agree. So taking us to our last key, which is to be able to focus on what you can control and influence. So choice of focus is really important for resilience and performance, because what you focus on is what you get. If you focus on what's wrong within something, you'll find many more things that are wrong. If you focus on fear, you'll have plenty more things to feel afraid of. And if you focus in on the uncertainty and the unknown, then you'll create many more reasons to be unworried. So most of what we worry about is not going to come true. When we're busy, it's easy to get overwhelmed because we've got so much on, and we're so worried and concerned about getting everything done. And a way to address overwhelm and a way to structure our thinking in a way that's going to be really resourceful to us is a model I want to share with you. It's not my model. You might have seen it before. It's by Covey, and it's a circles of influence and control model. So when we differentiate between what we're in control of, what we have influence over, and where we don't have control, nor do we have any influence, but we choose to be concerned about something. So there are three pockets that we can focus on that can help us structure our thinking around what we've got on in a way that can really help us focus on what are the most important things to focus on, and not invest too much emotional energy on the things that we have no control or influence over, but we may choose to be concerned about them. So again, if there's something, if there's a particular challenge that you are dealing with at the moment, what in that challenge do you have control over? So for what you have control over, within that, what are you going to choose to do? If you don't have control over that, but it's still part of your challenge, then how are you going to influence that? What's your voice? How can you, what conversations can you have? What can you initiate that would have some influence? And if you have no control nor influence, then, be careful about investing too much energy. Remember I spoke about being triggered before and creating spin-in stories and drama when they're things that you have neither no concern or influence over. Be careful about how much emotional investment you want to make. And I said be mindful of it, not to not give it any emotional investment. We're emotional and social human beings, where that's the way we're designed. We're always feeling emotion. It's just part of being human. But I'm trusting that this model will help guide you to say, well, what am I going to choose to focus on? Everything seems like it's important, but so what are my key goals? And within this particular key goal, what is in my control? And what am I going to make sure I'm on top of so that I can achieve the result that I've set for myself? So focus on what you can control and influence, and choose your focus wisely. Is the key there. So I'm conscious of time. It's coming up to 5 to 8. The hour goes so fast. Let me know, Tao, if there's anything that's come through in the Q&A box, and let's get on to the second poll as well. So I'd be really curious to know which of these 5 keys has resonated with you the most, where if there was an action that you took within one of these keys would really help make a difference to you feeling like you can succeed, you are succeeding, and you've got the resilience and mental toughness you need to be able to push through your current set of challenges or obstacles. I'm curious to know, can we bring the second poll up?
So I actually did create the poll, but I realized I missed key 3. So I'm going to launch it anyways. And if you chose key 3, if you can just put in the chat box. So key 3 is that pushing your self-limit that puts you into action. And that was actually what I was going to choose.
Yes, exactly. Or if there's something else that you think is actually more important than those 5 keys, because I said right at the start, I mean, this is not a silver bullet. This isn't the total list. This is, a list that I think is practically helpful when it comes to building mindset. And mindset is driving our thinking, and it's our thinking that's kind of driving how we experience everything. If there's something that you think is more important, feel free to put it in the Q&A, and I'd love to have a chat about it with you.
And whilst we're doing that, I think what would be good if we could circle back to the question that Toni had earlier around how do we change our mindset from suffering to thriving mindset. So, with the 5 keys that you shared, I definitely think where you can then change that mindset is really applying, some of the key 3s, especially around looking at retraining your inner critics, because, self-doubt and, just that inner voice, I think sometimes will stop you to be the best that you can be. So one of the questions was from Washington around what would be your advice for people who have difficulties in having open conversations and be able to speak their mind?
Yeah, this is a common question, so thanks for asking it. So initiating tricky conversations, I think it starts being clear about what it is you want to communicate. And even if you acknowledge that this is a tricky situation for you, I'm feeling a little out of my comfort zone here. This is a really tricky conversation for me. There are some things that I want to share, and even if you've got a list of things that you want to make sure that you articulate properly, don't be afraid to write the things down, and to be able to read them out if you're feeling nervous or you're worried oftentimes we're feeling nervous or worried because we're worried of what someone will think. We don't want to jeopardize the relationship. We don't want to be judged. And we're not even sure that our opinion might be right. So I think the first thing is to be able to back yourself. If you acknowledge that the conversation is important, then initiate having it. So I'd really like to be able to talk to you about this particular thing, and I'm trusting that the conversation will be useful to us both. But it's one I'd really like to have with you. Are you free tomorrow at 3 o'clock? So there's sometimes when we fear conflict, it's not conflict, it's about having a conversation. And oftentimes after we've had a tricky conversation, we can think, oh, that wasn't as hard as I thought. So be clear about what it is that you want to say, be open, be prepared to listen, be prepared to have your mind changed, but also prepare what you want to say. Don't feel afraid of writing it down and acknowledging that at the beginning of the conversation that this is a tricky conversation for you. Be clear about what your intention is, and also communicate what you're looking to get out of the conversation so that the other person knows that a really good conversation for me would look like this for us at the end. So at the end of it, you can say, look, I got what I needed from this, and thank you. Sometimes, what we worry about doesn't eventuate, but I think it's a skill. Having tricky conversations is a skill that can be learned over time, but no one likes having tricky conversations either. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Those are definitely practical advice. I tend to usually have the opposite problem. Like, I speak my mind freely. Most of the people love it. Some people don't care, and a few people hate me for that.
I hear you. So I think being clear on stating your intention is really important.
Yeah. Now, sometimes I think not for me, but observing some people, I have realized that some people don't have I don't know what's the courage, or just they don't really internalize how to express the true feelings, emotions, and what they're thinking. And I find it to be extremely difficult. I really like to have a straightforward conversation, right?
Yes.
Because we all be in the same level. It's much easier to deal with the situation. And most of the time, the situation is not as big as many people think.
Yes, and vulnerability can be helpful because it connects us. And people might go, I didn't realise that he or she was feeling like that. So, it's important to share, because in the sharing, it's kind of we're being ourselves. And when we're being, honest and open, we are vulnerable, but in the vulnerability can lead to, a deeper conversation or a deeper relationships and more trust. So being vulnerable is vulnerable, but there are lots of great reasons why vulnerability can really help as part of our communication.
Just being human, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I noticed that, for the biggest key was retraining your inner critic. So again, reach out to me at toni@tonicourtney.com. I'd love to send you the white paper. It's a really good read for overcoming your imposter syndrome, to be able to learn to build self-certainty, and to be able to learn to step into the confidence that you really want to feel, especially when you're stepping up, you're leaning into pressure, and you want to be able to bring your best. I work with so many people who know they're capable, but still in their heart of hearts, they believe that they are not good enough. And it affects how they show up, the voice that they have, and how they respond. And so a lot of people are playing small, yet within them is a really big game. So I think, confidence is probably, one of our biggest assets that is worth investing into, and it can be learned.
And Toni, do you have resource that goes further on the inner voice and how we can influence it?
On the inner voice?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So on my website, I've got a book. It's called Influence from the Inside Out. You can get a digital copy of this book for free on my website, or if you want a hard copy, email me and let me know. You can buy it off my website, or just again let me know, and I'm happy to send you that digital copy free. So this book goes into a lot more detail around how to build confidence from the inside out. And the book really is a journey of aligning leadership identity, which is how we perceive ourselves on the inside, who we want to be on the inside, who we want to show, and then our leadership brand, which is how others perceive us. And when we perceive ourselves in the same way as others perceive us, there's a real congruence. And when we bring ourselves authentically, and we do that really confidently, where we have a voice, where we can be bold, and we can lead from the front, from the side and behind. It's a really nice experience to have when we be and bring ourselves, which is then, we bring our best selves, because our best selves is our real selves as well. So people often say, I need to find myself. I don't think we ever lose ourselves, but we need to define ourselves and tap into the resources which we always have. We just have lost that access to them. So more than happy to send that to if it would be helpful to you.
Thank you, Toni. So I am conscious of time. I know we're 8 minutes over. What I would like to end is challenging you guys around, choosing one of the 5 key that you think that you want to push yourself in terms of creating that growth mindset, but also looking at how do you want to make a bigger and bolder move. So with that, Toni, really appreciate your time and sharing and the learnings that you have shared with us today. Sorry, did you say something?
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. And then so with that, it concludes our session for today. So we want to thank everyone for joining, and also a reminder that we do have an upcoming session on the 6th of May, and it's going to be around becoming a value-based leader with Stephen Berkeley. So we do also have an evaluation feedback form. So we'd love if you can spend 5 minutes on completing the survey, because your feedback is very helpful to us and to ensure that we are going to generate more inspiring and more thoughtful connections and network. So thank you.
Yes. And if you've got any other questions that wasn't covered today, if I couldn't hear you, I apologise for that. Feel free to email me and I'm more than happy to pick up the phone and have a chat to you. So I want to make sure you're served tonight. So if you didn't get what you needed or what you wanted, then round back. I'm happy to make sure you've gotten what you've needed from tonight.
Thank you all. Have a good day. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Wang, the founder of the Professional Development Forum.
PDF was established to help young diverse professionals find fulfillment in the modern Australian workplace.
By asking questions to the most successful, influential and inspirational people we knew.
We were inspired by their stories of tenacity and passion.
We learned about the creative approaches to overcome challenges.
We believe that everyone, not just the elite few, should have access to the knowledge, mindset and network to develop themselves.
By becoming the best version of ourselves, we lead a happier, more fulfilling life and inspire those around us to do the same.
Moving our events online has made us more accessible than ever. We share what we learned on our website, YouTube channel and podcast. So please share this video, subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. We look forward to seeing you at an upcoming event.